You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar M. Khatib. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Omar M. Khatib, and before we get on to our guests, a couple of quick shout outs for some commercial sponsors and some special offers I have for you. If you're an investor and you're looking to learn more about exciting early stage companies, you want to get a look before perhaps some of your peers in the venture world do, we at the State of MedTech have a database of a variety of interesting companies, of course, a lot of deal flow that comes through our show. So if you'd like to learn more, go ahead and just join our database. It's free. Check the show notes below, click that link, and fill out the information about yourself, the investments, and the check sizes you'd like to write. And we'll be in touch when we find things that fit your investment thesis. Secondly, if you're a founder, we know how difficult it is to get commercial traction. We know how hard it is to find early adopters. That's why here at Khatib & Co, we like to work with founders at an early stage company to get that commercial traction. We use AI and social media to help you target and find early adopters, and more importantly, drive adoption at scale for your product. So if you're interested in learning more, shoot me a message on LinkedIn or go and visit khatibandco.com. And lastly, let's face it, finding those early adopters is really difficult. A lot of times it's not enough just to look at who's on podium. This is why for a lot of what we do at Khatib & Co, we use Alpha Sophia. Alpha Sophia is a commercial database that you can look up any physician in the United States. You can find their procedure volume, what industry relationships they have, even, and this is the part that we like because we have our own analysis on it, what social media handles do they have? What social medias do they use? So if you want to get a free report, actually 3 free reports on it and see how the platform works, go to alphasophia.com/Omar to learn more. Now, I'm joined by my good friend, my Turkish brother from another mother, CEO and founder of SentiAR, Beriktas. Berk, it's so good to have you on the show. It took a while. I'm glad we were able to make it work. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Omar. Thank you. I have to correct you on one thing real quick. CEO, yes. Founder, no. I joined the founding team, and I don't take that lightly, although I'd like to think that I probably made it into that family with them. I'd like to think that, but I feel like that title should be reserved for folks who actually came up with the idea and brought it into that first fruition. And these folks have done a remarkable job before I joined them. So I don't want to take that away from the actual founders, but I appreciate you saying that.
And mine is, yeah, and a quick shout out to them, and that's your CMO, and so the two co-founders are Jennifer Avari Silva, Dr. Jennifer Avari Silva, and Dr. Jonathan Silva.
Correct. And then there's actually a third silent co-founder who doesn't require much attention, but he did all of the early technical work, and that's Mike Southworth.
Southworth, got it.
Yeah, we would not be here, certainly, without him quitting an actual paying job to join Jen and John to do this. So shout out to him as well.
That's fantastic. And yet I want to, before we jump into the company and everything, I wanted to share a story with the audience of how I learned about you. First, hands down, you have the best style of anyone in our industry. Hands down. And only you can pull off the style. And what makes me the most proud is that for a couple of years, I was like, man, this Berk guy has like the best style. And it never occurred to me that that's a Turkish name. And someone told me like, oh, do you know he's Turkish? And I like practically tackled you at LSI because I was like, how do we not know about it? Yeah. But when I first found out about you I think it was LSI, I want to say it was 2021. And we were in a surgical robotics presentation, and you asked the most profound question, in my opinion, the question that everyone should be asking. When you said that, I take note of people. This is like a thing since college. Anybody who asks really good questions, immediately I want to be friends with them because I'm like that's a great question. The question you asked is that you asked the panel and I'm paraphrasing here, that when it comes to surgical robotics, you have this razor blade model. And is it going to be somebody from our industry, or is it going to have to be somebody from the tech or a different industry who's going to come up and innovate a completely different business model because it's an outdated model? And I completely agree with you. Completely
Mhm.
agree.
That was a really, I was a little frustrated. That's probably where it
It-
came from, because we have been talking about, and we still do, digital transformation and digital surgery and how robotics are the front end of that, right? And then you go, but you're still doing the same exact business. If you stop selling consumables, what is digital about that? You have no business then. So it's a remarkable transformation, and there's so many facets to it. It's complicated. Hospitals don't know how to pay for it. We don't know how to charge for it. But yet it does need to be disrupted, in my opinion. Unfortunately, there wasn't a great answer in the panel for this, but I think that is a very elusive question. Yeah, it's interesting you took note of that. I actually have several folks came up to me, all like ear to ear smile, wondering, why did you ask this question? We all think of it. Yeah, it was an interesting moment in my life to be known for that question for years to come.
Oh, it was a great question. And yeah, I won't mention who the panelists, but yeah, the answer to it was like, just yeah, it was more of a diplomatic and political answer, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was in the audience,
Basically,
and I was
we don't know.
and it's yeah, I share that frustration. I love this. I know you have a lot of passion for the industry and for helping patients, and it's a mutual feeling for me. And so for me, even people forget that my frustrations about why I want to make sales and marketing better is because if we don't do a good job of that, these companies don't get funded, and or
Yes,
they don't get into the hands of physicians, and then ultimately patients suffer as a result of that. That's the thing that
yes,
people forget,
yes,
you know?
yes. It's a huge deal. I think there's a clear misunderstanding of what marketing is for the world we're in and what it
Hmm.
means to use that to introduce a new technology that could be life-saving. Folks have this view of marketing is running ads or doing a splashy thing, or you hire a marketing person to do it for. It's very different. It's almost like a holistic presentation of your company, and we could talk a lot more about this. So I share this passion. It's a grossly misunderstood area, I think, and our industry needs a disruption in this field as well.
100%. At the end of the day, marketing is really about values. It's not just like messages, but what are those? What's the meaning behind those messages? What do you stand for? Like, how is it different? And I think that hopefully, I just started just a quick side note. My good friend of mine and a marketer I really respect a lot, Orette Davis, and I just launched a like free weekly Zoom call called a MedTech Growth Lever. So it's just a Zoom call. We just started it this week, where we spend some time covering a topic and then we just open it up to Q&A. And the idea is that that's a way for us as agency owners to hopefully impart as much like free advice and help to people at scale. And so we'll see. I'm
That's a
not going
great
anywhere.
endeavor.
I'm staying in this
Awesome.
industry. So it's going to be a long
Awesome.
time. So let's get on like to the topic. So before we
Yeah,
talk about like the company, give the audience a little bit of background on yourself. Like, how did you get into this industry? What were you doing before you were the CEO of SentiAR?
sure. It's an interesting journey, because really when you look at where I was born, I really shouldn't be in this role now. The world has a way of introducing different pathways along the way and different people. So I've been very fortunate to come across opportunities that don't present themselves to everyone. So I am very fortunate. But I grew up in Turkey. I was 17. I graduated high school, and I was talking to my physics teacher. I was like, look, I really would like to go to the US. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there. I'd like to explore what the world is, and I'm very interested in going there. And he says, I'm a Rotarian, and there's an exchange program. Let me sign you up. And it literally came from a conversation with my physics teacher. Rest in peace. He's passed since. So he does this. And then I came here on an exchange program, and then high school was a joke here. I was in every EP class, and I didn't have a calculator or a book. I would just sit there and do the problems, and people thought I was a genius. I'm like, no, there's millions like me in Turkey. I'm just average. Let me be very clear. We're just trained to do this, right? Like a thoroughbred horse. This is what we've been doing for a long time. So that was a fun experience. But I applied to colleges, and I was fortunate to get a scholarship to study engineering and physics here in Minnesota. And really, the only downside of all this is ended up being in Minnesota. I would have taken so many other places where the weather makes it inhabitable, but somehow people suffered through it here. And now I've been doing the same for 23 years. Another interesting twist that has happened, I came 3 weeks before 9/11. That was character building because 9/11 happened and everyone was confused. People didn't know when you're from that area, they didn't know what that meant. Do you hate the US, Berk? Or what do you think? I got this question, Omar. It's so funny. I got this question like 1,000 times. What do you think about this? The towers coming down. I'm like, what do you think I can think about it? I'm a human. Like a lot of people die. This is an unbelievably sad situation. I probably think exactly what you think. But it's funny, right? People specifically picking me out and asking me, what do you think? Pretty similar to what you think. So that was an interesting thing to be dealing with as a 17-year-old. Anyway, fast forward, I started writing software in robotics, of all things. I was writing code for industrial robotics, big cranes, automated cranes, or advanced kinematic motion control for cutting machines and things like that, industrial stuff. And one of our projects was for Johnson & Johnson's Vistakon division, makes contact lenses, and they were upgrading their manufacturing line. They brought us in, and we were in that meeting, and I fell in love with one thing. The engineers we were meeting with were so focused on patients, what their work was going to do for patients, the safety of the product. It would come constantly over and over again. We were essentially a job shop, right? One of these companies you hire to do stuff for you. We didn't have that passion for the things we made. We made it. Our incentive was to quickly as possible move on to the next thing. So you never got attached to what you did. And I was so envious of their passion because I didn't have that for the work we did. I was interested and I liked it, but I saw that passion and like the light in their eyes and the drive and the motivation. So I really wanted to be a part of that. What brought me into med device world, I ended up getting a job at Boston Scientific as a mechanical engineer. I was like, I'll do anything. Let me just get in here. And I spent several years there. Then from there, it went into startups. And that is another story, a very intriguing story. I was traveling and I ended up sitting next to the CEO of the company I joined, a startup, on a 6-hour plane ride. I didn't know he was the CEO until he gave me his card as we were leaving and departing the plane. He just said, give me a call. So I did. And a year later, he hired me to work for him. And that was my first startup experience. It was a cardiac device, again, a heart failure circulatory support device. It went through quite a journey. It was a publicly listed company at some point. It still is, actually. But I left several years later, did another startup in England. We moved there. My son was born there. We did a remote monitoring patch-based product. When AI wasn't quite as cool as it is now, we actually had a learning algorithm that would baseline each patient and then generate alarms based on deviations from that baseline. Then that company got acquired by a Dutch company. Then I moved on to TAVR, a good friend who was with me in the first startup company. He called me, he hired me to work for him, actually. So I did that. And then I met the founders of SentiAR while I was in that TAVR business. And I fell in love with first the people, 100%. In fact, my conversation with Jen, they were looking for a CEO. And I was like, why aren't you doing this? I don't think you need me. You have what you need here. And she was like, look, I am a clinician. I don't want to stop doing that. I'm forever going to be a clinician. It was just so many levels I fell in love with them. So I joined SentiAR, and the technology, the people, our culture, everything about it is what I dreamt of I could build someday. So it's quite a point of pride for all of us. It's an exciting time for us. But back to your question, that's my weird tipsy-turvy, turny journey of getting from Turkey, from a military family to where we are now, sitting on this podcast.
No, I love it. And everybody has a very interesting way of getting into the space. And I don't think very few, almost none of us like came out of school saying, yeah, I'm going to go work in medtech, except Henry Peck. He's the only person that I know that before he even started college, he knew he was going to be in the industry. And it makes sense because
Fascinating.
he's so good at what he does. So what is the main problem that SentiAR solves? And why is
Yeah,
that
so
important?
yeah, SentiAR was founded with this vision that the current way of consuming digital information, so imaging data, monitoring data, vital signs, ultrasound, fluoroscopy. In the specific procedure we focused in is electrophysiology, where there's real-time three-dimensional data of the heart anatomy and the electrical activity. Any sort of instrumentation related data or imaging related data is all digital. And the way that's consumed and interacted with right now is through one of the most antiquated ways, which is a monitor and people. So the physician has, it's a very brute force way that the field has evolved. Electrophysiology, especially ablation that we're in, is affecting millions of people in the world. It's a monster market. And the best solution we came up with so far is put everything on a giant screen, hang it from the ceiling, take one half of the patient bed, give physician close to the information they want to see, not where they want it. They can't move things around with ease. None of the three-dimensional information is actually 3D because it's compressed into two-dimensional view, and they have no control over it. They're in the case, they want to see something new, want to take a measurement, they want to freeze an image, and they're using, this is an image-guided therapy, so that the body is closed. They entered it through some tiny hole. So everything they're doing is through instrumentation and data. And this is the best we got, which is totally brute force way of doing it, and it's how it's evolved. And the vision was there has to be a better way. This is causing problems. People can't see what they want to see. They can't get to the spots they want to get to. Procedures take too long. It's too hard. It takes too many people. There's real economic issues of having to bring these patients in all the time. The amount of people you have to put in the room, the amount of effort it takes for a physician and the time it takes for a physician to complete the procedure. There was a lot of issues. Never mind the cost of putting a massive screen, putting ceiling reinforcements, putting a gantry, all this stuff. So the vision was there has to be a better way. What does that look like? How can we solve this problem? And then out came Microsoft HoloLens right around that time. In fact, when the founders became aware of it, Microsoft hadn't come out with it yet. They brought in these professors around the nation into a think tank kind of a thing. And they said, look, we're working on something like this. Here it is. Here's a version of it. Go and think of ways that this can help you. So John seen this and immediately calls Jen and says, hey, I think I got a solution for this problem that we've been talking about. And that's the genesis of the idea is if you wear an augmented reality glasses, which can render a hologram, now you're wearing a computer. Now you can interact with what you're seeing. You can see the things that are in 3D in actual 3D, as opposed to combining it in your mind's eye. You can collaborate. You can have multiple people wear it. You can remotely access this data in its entirety rich without any loss. Sky's the limit, right? You're wearing a computer, and now you have an appropriate way to interact with a digital data set in a procedure. So when you look at the field, so much of it has evolved for AR, VR around training and education. We solve a different problem, very procedural focused, allowing folks to see things they can't see those things faster, interact with them, allow fewer people in the room, and eventually change the dynamic where the space required could be smaller, take it out of the hospital setting, maybe in the ambulatory surgical centers. So the vision is very bold and is quite transformative. Those are the specifics around the company's foundation. We've now come a long way. That was 7-8 years ago, the idea was born. Company was formalized 7 years ago. I joined them almost 6 years ago now. We have actually FDA clearance for the first version of the product, which renders a hologram of the heart anatomy in real time. And you can see your catheters in it in real time. We've published studies on it. It's currently in clinical use. So we've come a long way since then. And what's really satisfying is what we envisioned it would do for physicians and allowing them to serve their patients better is happening right now and is so satisfying. 6 years later, when a physician looks at you and says, "Do you guys know what you've done here?"
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
It's a very satisfying feeling.
The concept as more things get proceduralized, and again with it, it's funny. If I thought about it like 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that, at least in the heart space, it used to be that the cardiac surgeons had a lot of leverage and power, but it's really the interventional cardiologists now, right? Because people don't want these big procedures. They want interventions that are going to happen earlier in a much easier way. And so because of that, visualization is very big in surgery. In the orthopedic space, visualization is huge. In the cardiac space, you don't hear as much about things like AR. And so I'm wondering, just on the publication side, what kind of papers have been published recently? And what if there's anything like new in that space? Or what are they writing about and what are they discovering?
So this is really interesting. SentiAR is literally paving this path forward. Since our first publication, there has been many from other universities and companies around the globe starting to look into cardiac space. And specifically, we were focused initially, and our product is in electrophysiology. But since our first paper, which was probably 2019, we've now published 10 manuscripts that are peer-reviewed, looking at different value propositions of the system, as well as its engineering, how it performs, how it can do this in real time, how can it create a hologram with near zero latency, how can it integrate with the imaging systems that's in the room. One of the most recent papers that was actually presented at Heart Rhythm Society meeting as a poster presentation this year in May was from our 100-patient clinical study. It was done in Boston with two centers, Beth Israel and Mass General. And we measured a number of efficiency metrics, communication load, as well as looking at physicians' navigation accuracy in getting to certain points within the heart with this catheter that they're manipulating from the femoral artery. And study showed there's a statistically significant improvement in their ability to reach their points when they use a hologram that they can control. The crux of the issue here is visualization alone is half the story. There's an enormous element of being able to control what both of them combined allows the technology to become an extension of the human that's operating. So it's really an augmentation exercise. And in that way, it's not dissimilar to a robot. A robot does the same thing, mainly starting with the dexterity of the human. Can you hold your hand still? Where are you? How are you going to change your tools? Of course, there's a visualization element. What are you seeing? How I clear that up? And it's quite complicated. But robot augments the human. What we're seeing with AR is a true augmentation of being able to understand three-dimensional structures within the human anatomy. And then there are other elements of seeing the information when you want to see it. And when you don't want to see it, for it to go away. You can't create these sort of dynamic visualization or data presentation if you have an antiquated monitor. It just doesn't work like that. It's not designed for that. And it can't track you, right? It doesn't know what you're doing. It's designed as a single directional display mechanism for people to watch TV. It's not meant to be interacted with. Allowing physicians to interact with the data they see, and that's the new frontier we're paving here, is looking at AR as a data management tool. Not just looking at cool pictures, but how do you activate this data that's sitting there? How do you make it interactive? And what will that do for the physician? Will they get better at what they do? Will they get faster? Will they get safer? Will it be more efficient in general for everyone in the room? Ultimately, patient benefits. So a body of evidence is emerging. We are leading the way currently, and it comes with its advantages and disadvantages. It's a lot of work to pave a new path. It is quite rewarding when you can do something like this, pave a pathway, and others can come and serve the patients even more.
Interesting. Can you dive into that more? I mean, that's the first time I've heard somebody talk about it, at least on the AR side, about how do you visualize and like work with data more. So like in this case, you guys are your first FDA clearance or indication is for interventional cardiology. So like an interventional cardiologist, what would that look like in a use case?
Yeah, so it's an interventional electrophysiology, not to split the atom here, but it's a little different. Interventional cardiologists might be doing structural heart interventions, the valve replacements and things like that. But interventional electrophysiologist is trying to figure out the electrical circuit. The way we talk about it is you got the plumber and the electrician. Cardiologist is mainly the plumbers.
And this is good to know because we have quite a lot of investors and family officers who followed it, but they don't have like a medical background. For the electrophysiologists, is that like post-medical school? Is that a residency that's completed? It's just
it requires specialized training. They have to go back and get more training above and beyond the cardiology.
Residency in cardiology, and then you do a fellowship in electrophysiology, essentially.
This is a good question. I don't actually know what the specific names for the training they have to do. What I do know is
I went to medical school.
if we can phone a friend, Jen can tell us exactly what she had to do to become one. But I remember this. I think it was about 13 years of training before they were practicing on their own. So it's a very specialized, data-heavy field. Here's how electrophysiology works. You have the structure of the heart, like a interventional cardiologist would have to do. And then on top of that, you have the electrical activation of the heart, which requires electrical data being processed in real time. There's an imaging modality that processes it and turns it into a topography map around the structure with colors. But they also have the raw electrograms and ECGs that the physician consumes in real time and makes decisions off of it. They literally watch this data in real time. And they just watch it and then they see stuff. It's when you have an untrained eye, it looks like they're looking at the matrix, stuff flowing down and seeing things. It's a little bit like that, and that's their training kicking in. There's imaging data, other imaging data, fluoro, ICE, TEE, depending on the case. Lots of data coming together. All of it is disparate right now. So they're not connected. They don't interact with one another. The only way that you make it look as if they interact with one another is there's people in the background sitting in the control room. As the physician is doing the case, they conduct the team as well. It's a very fascinating thing to watch. They're doing their case and they'll go, can you bring this information up? Hey, Jim, can you turn this on? John, can you go back 4 milliseconds? Jane, can you just turn this model a little bit? They're constantly conducting this very complicated play, which is on top of patient care. And the way we look at that is it's all data, right? All this data is flowing at them right now. And they have to figure out a way to bring that data together, make it actionable, gain insights from it, all in real time. And this is where augmented reality, you actually have to take a step back and perhaps think of it more like spatial computing, a wearable computer. It's interactive. Now you have this natural way to interact with a computer with what you never had this opportunity. Now you do, because the thing you put on your head knows where you're looking, what you're saying, and as you iterate, what you want to do next, right? Think about the sky's the limit when you know what the person is trying to do with all this data coming together. So that's the data activation component of this. And every procedure that is image guided, so interventional cardiology, interventional radiology, they all have a form of this because they're operating on data, right? They can't see it with the naked eye, so they have to consume data. So this is a pervasive problem in minimally invasive or image guided situations, and it probably does include ortho as well, above and beyond just the visual component. How do you activate different data streams that you see and make it more intuitive? This is a very big problem in EP. We understand EP really well. That's where we started because of that.
Got it. That makes sense. And it's interesting just because I think we spend close to a quarter of our GDP just on healthcare, but there's so many places to improve. And one of those simple areas that are going to improve that'll increase cost savings is just the efficiency of how things are done. Like we're like, sometimes we get used to it in the hospital, but when you're in the hospital and you look at even in a surgery, like certain things of how like a room is turned over, you're like, wow, this is really not that efficient. So for the places that have adopted SentiAR on the hospital administrative side, what about the product do they like the most? Is it the fact that they're able to streamline things and cut down a lot of the time from electrophysiologists asking for certain data to be pulled up? Because that stuff adds up, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
What do hospital administrators say?
Yeah, it's still early days, so we don't have a clear read on this yet. But I can share some of the early insights we're seeing. So I think one of the things that administrators like the most is the investments they have made into equipment, rooms, staff, and mainly the electrophysiologists that they bring into their hospital. Some of them are private practitioners, some of them are hospital employees. Everyone's efficiency increases. Their administration's investment into technology gets elevated to the next level because SentiAR is an enabling technology. It has the potential to unlock all the tools you invested in and operate them at a higher level, inclusive of the people. So this is where the intriguing conversations are happening right now. Like I said, it's early days, so we don't have clear data exactly on like where this is going to land within the administration's mind. But we have so many cases where collaboration, for example, like we had a case where two physicians were in the room and a chief of the department wanted to see what's going on, but he was scrubbing for another case. So he just put glasses on him. He didn't even have to be there. He was like within the vicinity, but it was scrubbing in the hallway. He was looking at what they're doing, put an intercom on, and started talking to him, to the physicians in the room while he's in the hallway scrubbing. So like this kind of thing, administration hears about this stuff, right? They're like, oh, that could have taken an hour or 30 minutes of the next case being delayed, but it didn't have to happen that way. As I said, it's still anecdotal because it's early days, but these are some of the early insights and signals that we're seeing.
That's interesting. And I think what's fascinating is with certain technology, especially in the early phases, you have a thesis of why people might adopt it, but then until they adopt it, you start learning. So I know it's super early right now, but just with the few data points that you have, what have you seen as to why a clinician adopts the product versus why do they continue using it? Because a lot of times it's two different reasons, right?
Yes,
Sometimes.
yes.
I'm wondering what you guys have seen.
Yeah, this is very true. So one of the things that have surprised us the most, even though that you believe it, you develop it, but you don't know what kind of immediate reaction you're going to get. One thing was almost every physician that tries the system and sees it, perhaps even hears about it, they go, oh my God, we've been looking for something like this for 20 years. But literally, this is a problem we've had for so long. Thank you for solving it. So then they start using it. Reasons why almost everyone who adopts it and likes the system is the ability to see and control what they see. Being able to see a hologram and actually putting your head inside was never possible until we came along. So we've changed the dynamic entirely, right? Now they don't have to rely on somebody else to give them the information the way they want it. They now have full control. And it's not compressed. It's not lost. It's not 2D where they have to process. It's 3D. And we envisaged that would be the case. And it is indeed the primary reason people adopt and start using it. Being able to see, being able to control, they think they are more accurate, more efficient, and safer in their manipulation of the catheters within the heart. Other surprising things have been what types of cases they use it for. Like some cases we thought, no one will use this for it. You find some physicians are like, that is the only case I love this for. The thing that we thought wouldn't be relevant. And we're seeing physicians like, I like it because of this, right? And they have a very specific reason. They're like, oh, I can see the structure better, and there's a critical structure right there, and we're ablating right near it. Now I have full 3D view. I feel so much safer. I'm going to use it for every one of those cases. And in fact, I'm going to move my cases, if it was with a different platform, onto this because it has SentiAR, because it's so valuable for that one thing that I do. And that was a surprise to us. We have not anticipated some of these cases to be such a good fit. So then we're learning the product really doesn't have a niche. It's just variable. It's very personalized. And that's something that we anticipate, right? How personalized it is and how it makes the physician feel empowered on which case they're going to use it for, great, but what value they get from that case. And then they're like, okay, if I get that value, I'm going to use it for here. And this is the kind of thing we didn't fully anticipate, how they're going to really just make it their own. It's their extension. It's such a different thing for a medical device. You can't do that with a catheter, right? You can't make it you can't change it. It's what it is. Whereas here, they're using it in ways that's unique, and everyone has their own slant to it. So we didn't anticipate this amount of personalization, which has been a remarkable learning for us. I think there's probably going to be a lot more we're going to learn, but these are the early insights from the initial adoption.
That's fascinating. And just as we round out the interview, a couple questions I have more on the business side, which is like, what's the business model for this?
Yeah.
How does SentiAR make money?
This brings us back to the question I posed however many years ago, where it piqued your interest, right? You can imagine a scenario where you, in a vacuum, develop a business model and say, why don't we make this completely value-based? You pay for what you use. You use it for X amount of hours, pay for X amount of hours. Totally make it a SaaS model. You think like that, right? And then you have a conversation with an administrator and they go, I don't know how to pay for that. I literally don't know how to pay you for that. What committee do I go to? Who do I get approval from? For how much? How do I know my total commitment is going to be for this thing? Let me tell you how we pay for stuff. You either are an expense for the procedure, and that goes into this bucket, or your capital equipment, which may have a service thing, and it goes into this bucket. Where do you fall? And this is why all those big companies that are sitting on the panels talking about digital transformation are not able to transform how something gets paid, because the hospital doesn't really know how to pay for it. Now, a big company that's worth multi-bajillion dollars, you'd think they can work with the administration to say, let's do this a little differently. And we might lose a little bit of money now, but we're going to make a lot more, and you're going to be very much more satisfied if we don't waste time on this antiquated process of buying everything like a capital equipment or buying everything like it is a per procedure consumable thing. So in our world, what people do to fit into one of these buckets, they create things that become essentially a consumable, so it's a per procedure charge, or they go through a capital committee. In our case, it's a more of a capital thing. It just doesn't fit into the per procedure bucket because it's a new baseline on how you're doing a case. And although you can make it so that they activate it per case, then you end up increasing the case cost. Whereas that's not really a fair assessment of what's going on here. But it's early, right? And we're still working this out. Every center has a slightly different view. But I just shared with you the macro trends that we see, which hasn't changed in probably the last 50 years. I don't know. It's probably been the same since we've been selling gauze pads and Band-Aids. And now 3D hologram, still the same.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think hopefully the introduction of new technologies like this is a forcing function for hospitals to consider, like, how do we pay for things and how do we adopt new technologies and stuff? in a way that's going to be obviously beneficial to the hospital because it is a business, but more importantly, so they can pass on to that to the patient. I think what's interesting about your technology is that it's a platform technology in a couple ways. And again, if you disagree, please tell me. One, on the side of that, you're technically technology agnostic. So you're bringing in data, and you're not tied to any specific company, right? Which at least for me, I think is really interesting because like certain companies that are out there, the Medtronics, the Boston Scientifics of the world and everything, they're not going to develop technology like this in-house at all. And so this lends itself to potential and very interesting partnerships, potential acquisitions. The other side of it that I see it as like a really interesting platform technology is that you have a thesis of the best use cases for this, but then when you give it to the users, it allows them through the pathway of technology to practice a sort of modern version of the art of medicine, which is that you don't know how they're going to use it, which I really like that. And it'll be interesting to have you back on the show like a year from now to see like what sort of new applications and which I think is fascinating. And the other thing, your guys' first FDA clearance was in the case of the heart and electrophysiology, but technically what you have, there's like a variety of other clinical applications outside of the heart. Is that correct?
Yes. We often get inbound interest from interventional cardiologists, interventional radiologists who are doing neurointervention, spine or neck or things like that. Essentially, we're getting lots of inbound questions. Hey, can you integrate with this? Do you guys have this kind of thing? Can you work with our system? Some of the companies that reach out. And as a startup, although everything sounds interesting and exciting, and the people who do startups are generally have a very low activation potential, right? You just touch them and they go. It's very tempting. You'll be like, of course we can do that. Let's do it tomorrow. And then you have to be disciplined to deliver something, some sort of value, de-risk, return some capital, and then you get to do this more later on. So totally, the platform side of it is absolutely accurate. In fact, here's a new, and I think it's being talked about a little bit from the intuitive side, maybe. If they're not, they should be talking about it. We view this as the operating system for the image-guided therapy, all of them. There is no reason why a user should consume information in any other way. You look ahead. Why do we have Windows? In and of itself, Windows is not a valuable thing. If you had no apps on it, it does nothing. But it made interaction with these Word and Excel, whatever, so easy, so intuitive, so obvious. And Mac is the same way, right? In and of itself, these operating systems do nothing, but you today wouldn't imagine not having one. We started by not having one, right? We essentially wrote code, dear whatever, and then you got a list of applications and you had the right command to pull one up. And then we realized that doesn't work, right? You need to make it more intuitive. So I see this as that transformation for all of image-guided therapies, because essentially today, that's what they're doing. They're telling somebody, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. What if there was an operating system that connected all that? So when you pause and think about it, who knows where it will go? But it's not going back in the bag, that's for sure. So that's how we think about the platform side of it is, what if what we needed in image-guided therapies is an operating system? Everyone wins. The ecosystem wins, applications wins, user, everybody, patients.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I think what I think is exciting about medtech now is that is the introduction of a lot of these new technologies, which are changing, like literally changing medical practice. Plus the fact that with data capture, I have a lot of the old medical textbooks that I went to school with, but a lot of them didn't have the automation of data. And so when you automate data and you have all this introduction of new data, that's going to change how you interpret and solve problems. And then added to that, you look at the biggest companies in the world, Amazon, Google. So I feel like I'm Apple, of course.
Apple, yeah.
Yeah. They have a fiduciary responsibility to continue growing. And so Apple's not going to wake up one day and be like, hey, let's go into the furniture business. Like everybody's looking at healthcare and saying, it's a lot of money there. It's a lot of problems to be fixed. So I think the convergence of all these things is going to really accelerate both technological and business model innovation. And it was really interesting to see. Berk, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Are you going to be working? First of all, I know that you're active on LinkedIn. For people who are interested to learn more about the company, you can go to their website, SentiAR.com. That's spelled SentiAR.com. And then are you going to be at any upcoming conferences, people, whether it's an investor or clinician that can meet up with you? What conferences are you guys going to for the rest of the year?
Yeah, thanks for that. First of all, the website is a little outdated. We have to update that. So bear with us. If you're going
It's
there,
not a bad website, man. For early stage company, trust me, it's a nice website. I understand. Here's the most important part. I like within a few seconds, I'm like, okay, I understand what they do, because some websites of even later stage companies I go and I'm, what am I buying?
I am so glad to hear that, because that's one thing, what we always believed. I would rather say less and show less, but at least it's understandable. If I don't have time to make it succinct, then I'm just going to say fewer things. So I'm glad to hear that. But come visit it more often, because we will be adding updates to that. Currently, I am planning to be at LSI Europe in Portugal.
Oh, man. I want to be there. Scott was like putting pressure on me. He invited me. He's like, look, just come out. It'll be fun. But my parents can be overseas that time. And I feel bad leaving my wife with the kid the whole time.
That's right.
I might just like last minute just say I'm going to do it. But anyways, yeah, LSI Europe is happening in
Portugal this year. It's obviously one of the most premier investor conferences. I'm currently planning on being there. And then we have a Heart Rhythm Society meeting in September in Atlanta. And we have a couple of abstracts being presented by some of our users. SentiAR is going to actually be hosting the opening day reception. The meeting is called HRX in September in Atlanta. So if you're there, look us up. We'll be there. That's probably it for this year. We might go to conference in Israel. That's in December. Currently, we're actually planning on being there. I think we'll end up being there. Yeah, no, thanks for asking that question. And then another thing that we're working on is a little more of a social media presence for SentiAR, sharing the things we've been doing. Very quiet. Our Twitter account, I think I'm worried Elon is going to cancel it on us because it's been dormant for so long. I'm hoping here we're going to be engaging a little deeper there as well. So stay tuned.
Fantastic. That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. And just similarly, your platform technology, the exciting thing about social is that more physicians are spending time on there, especially between Twitter and LinkedIn. And so what I always like to see with clients, and we saw this like when we worked with Moon Surgical, which is you have a hypothesis as to who you want to target and everything, but when you start putting out content in a certain way, certain people come to you that you had no idea about. And you're like, oh my God, they're like perfect. It's like one of my favorite parts. That's why I like early adopter profiling. That's like my favorite part.
I feel like there's this journey of awareness to advocacy, right? And it's just like any other funnel that you think about. Today, in the past, you had to put hundreds of people on the ground to go meet with everybody. Now you can use this digital tools that we have to engage folks in a really meaningful way. I'm saying it, we haven't done it yet, but I do believe the work you're doing, Omar, I might talk to you about it anyway after we're done here. But I think it's a very important thing. Awareness, taking that all the way to creating advocacy with your users. It's not going to happen by itself. It takes time. All these physicians are bombarded with a billion things. You need to be able to differentiate yourself somehow. They just need to hear your voice. And then they can decide. But it's not fair if they never hear about you.
Yeah, 100%. Berk, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to remind the listeners
Thanks, Omar.
again. Yeah, no, my pleasure. Go follow Berk on LinkedIn and the company. And if you're a listener to the show, don't forget, give us 5 stars. We're the #1 show in MedTech for a reason, because I always remind you guys to give us 5 stars and write a review. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.